Welcome to Book Bites, rapid reviews for rabid readers. Today's topic is historical fiction. I'm Carol Eymen, and I'm the Outreach and Community Services Coordinator at the Nashua Public Library. All the books I'm going to tell you about today are available at the Nashua Public Library. So let's get started. First, I have two books by Geraldine Brooks. The first one is People of the Book. This book reminded me of the Da Vinci Code, but the writing is much better. I'd call it a religious history thriller. It's about a book conservationist who is hired to restore an illuminated Hebrew manuscript that was created in the 1400s. And she wants to do it right, so she wants to find out everything she possibly can about the history of the book. If you're a person who likes CSI, you'll really love reading about the investigation. She finds tiny artifacts in the book, like a piece of an insect, some wine stains, bits of salt and hair. And what's fascinating is how she's able to scientifically analyze them and discover the history of the manuscript. It turns out that it's been through hell. It has survived the book burnings from the Inquisition and the Nazis, and then the shelling of Sarajevo's libraries in the 1990 wars. And then the second book by Geraldine Brooks is March. Now, you all know the cliche that there's two sides to every story. Well, that goes for Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, too. March is the story of Mr. March, who was the father of Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy. And through most of Little Women, Mr. March was away as a chaplain in the Civil War. He wrote letters home, but if we're going to believe Geraldine Brooks' version of the story, those letters were full of lies. What really happened to him during the war was far more disturbing than anything he wanted to tell his family. And Brooks based the character of Mr. March on Louisa May Alcott's real father, who was a utopian, and he was a good friend of Emerson and Thoreau's. So after you read this book, I highly recommend you take a visit to the Fruitlands Museum in Harvard, Mass. There you can learn more about the utopia that Alcott and Emerson created. And just a reminder, you can borrow all these books free if you have a Nashua Public Library card. Free cards are available for anyone who lives in Nashua, of course, but also for people who work or go to school in Nashua or are retired from work in Nashua or own property here. And next I want to talk about The Book of Negroes by Lawrence Hill. I have a sister who lives in Toronto, and she keeps me current on the best books coming out of Canada, and The Book of Negroes was one of them. Its American title is far less memorable. It was Someone Knows My Name. I especially recommend this book to you if you read the 2011 Nashua Reads book, Song Yet Sung. The Book of Negroes, or Someone Knows My Name, is a fictional autobiography of a slave who was one of the few that was allowed to learn to read and write. It starts out when she's kidnapped in Africa and she's forced to march for months on end to the ocean. Then she's thrown on a slave ship and sent to South Carolina to a plantation. Now, during the American Revolution, because she knows how to read and write, she's selected to record the Book of Negroes. And this was actually a real historical document, a list of slaves who were supposed to receive safe passage to Nova Scotia in return for being loyal to the British Crown. Now, I just also want to remind you that at the end of this program, we're going to show you a list of today's titles and authors. And they're also posted at www.nashualibrary.org/bookbites. The next book is Loving Frank by Nancy Horan. This book weaves fact and fiction as it tells the story of Mama Borthwick Cheney, a woman who had an extended affair with architect Frank Lloyd Wright. In 1909, the two of them scandalized everyone in Chicago. They abandoned their spouses and their children, and they took off for Europe together. They spend many years together until in the final chapter, something really horrible and shocking happens. I'm not going to give it away, but unfortunately that event I found out later was completely true. And I have a field trip recommendation for this book too. Go up to Manchester and see the Zimmerman House, which was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, and you can take a tour of it. And for the final book today, I'm going to talk about The Last Town on Earth by Thomas Mullen. This is about a fictional town in the Pacific Northwest. During the 1918 flu epidemic, the town decides to quarantine itself to prevent the spread of the flu to its residents. It sounds like a good idea, but it really doesn't work out very well. The book will appeal to you if you like medical thrillers, like say you like the film Contagion, or maybe you like to read books by Robin Cook. Although The Last Town on Earth is not really fast-paced. It's more of a literary book. And there's also a backstory in it about the union movement. The town was founded by laborers who build and run their own cooperative timber mill. And it all happens against the backdrop of World War I. You'll be amazed at the parallels to the political atmosphere in the US during the Iraq War. So that's it for Book Bites today, but before we go, I want to remind you that books are not the only thing you can borrow at the Nashua Public Library. We have over 12,000 movies, we have music CDs, magazines, for the kids we have puppets, we have PS2 and Wii video games, and we also have museum passes, which get you into a dozen different museums for either free or at a huge discount. So join us next time, and if you want us to feature a certain type of book on a future episode, just send me an email. My address is carol.eymen@nashualibrary.org.